A midweek win in Europe, but now he faces domestic opposition on home territory where he's already suffered defeats. Tomorrow could go either way as Parliament readies for Super Saturday.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Today the team was being updated as the Prime Minister met with his cabinet, a cabinet that is on board.
I think we have a compelling proposition to go to Parliament tomorrow and ask all members of Parliament to back this new deal and help us leave the EU, get us out of the EU on October the 31st.
A confidence not shared by all ministers that they can convince enough MPs to vote for the deal.
Well, who knows? There's all sorts of discussion. This is politics, right? It's about talking. And if there was ever a time for Giorgio, it's now.
Overnight, talks between Downing Street and the DUP effectively ended. Behind this door today, phone calls and meetings putting the hard sell on three main groups across Parliament and within his own party, essentially asking them to make a decision on a deal with a lot of detail at very short notice and with no official economic analysis.
I've had very constructive discussions. These are massive issues, and I'm very glad that we've had such constructive discussions. Nothing is concluded yet.
As yet, Bill Cash is still on the sidelines, but from his team, the ERG, so far 12 look like they could back the deal. Then there's the Tory 21, former Conservative MPs who are no longer in the party. At least a third of those have said they will vote with their former leader. And lastly, the Labour leavers. At the moment, little more than enough to field a five-a-side team.
Let's make it clear, I can't see Labour MPs voting for this. There was a handful last time who voted for Theresa May's. This is worse. This threatens not just workers' rights, consumer rights and the environmental standards that we've protected under Labour governments for generations.
Tonight, Jeremy Corbyn urged all Labour MPs to reject the deal, a request some say no to.
Well, there were 5 of us who voted in March 29 for Prime Minister May's deal. There were 19 of us who wrote to the European Commission 2 weeks ago saying we wanted to support a deal.
Do you think all 19 from that letter will be voting for Boris Johnson's deal?
I don't know if all 19 will be, but I think a good number will be.
Do you think it's going to pass?
I think there's a very good chance that the Prime Minister will get his deal through tomorrow.
Well, at the minute I'm still for voting for the deal, although I've been asked by Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell to consider abstaining on the basis of workers' rights.
Tonight, the Prime Minister said his deal will provide, quote, the highest standards and protections on workers' rights, an assurance that's fallen flat here.
I wouldn't trust them 2 years down the line, if it need be.
And that's it, you think all things could change in a couple of years' time?
Yes, you never know. Let's put it this way, I don't trust the Tories' workers' rights.
So, you haven't made your decision as yet. When are you going to make your decision?
It'll be tomorrow, I'm sure. I'll do it tomorrow.
But before we get to that main vote on Boris Johnson's deal on the so-called Super Saturday, there could be a not inconsiderable twist. So Oliver Letwin has tabled an amendment which he says is a guarantee to ensure that the UK doesn't crash out of the EU on October 31st, either by mistake or because something goes wrong with the government's plan. If Parliament votes for the amendment, it would mean that whatever happens tomorrow, even if Boris Johnson gets the votes, his deal would not pass. And he would be forced to write a letter to the EU requesting an extension. For weeks, it was the tricky away game in Europe that many thought Boris Johnson would have trouble winning. Tomorrow, a Prime Minister with no majority and in need of 320 votes will find out if the harder match is on home turf.
Paul McNamara reporting there. Well, joining me now is Jill Rutter from UK in a Changing Europe and Sam Lowe from the Centre for European Reform. So before asking if MPs will actually vote for this deal, Sam, what is this deal in essence?
So this deal in essence is predominantly the same deal as Theresa May put to Parliament, but with one big change. Instead of there being a backstop, which would be an insurance policy for Northern Ireland and would have all UK elements and some Northern Ireland specific elements, this is it has a Northern Ireland only specific solution that would see Northern Ireland remain in the EU's regulatory area for goods and agri-food, and also de facto in the EU's customs union, but not legally so.
OK, so people watching this at home will want to know very simply, does it make them richer or poorer?
Well, we don't know yet. This is the big thing about Brexit. We are talking about the withdrawal agreement. So what we have is the nature for withdrawal. We still don't know what the future relationship between the UK and EU looks like. What we know is Johnson's vision for it, which is to have as much freedom as possible to pursue deals with the rest of the world whilst putting up barriers to trade with the EU.
And to be clear, this is a harder version of Brexit than Theresa May's deal.
It has the potential to be harder, and Theresa May's deal had a customs union to fall back on, but at the end of this process in December 2020, we could have a no-deal type WTO agreement with the EU, WTO relationship with the EU, or we could be in the single market. It all depends on who's negotiating.
Right, and so that's where this cliff edge, December 2020 is all important, isn't it?
Well, yes, it's the third phase of Brexit.
Right.
We now get to spend the next few years negotiating what the future relationship looks
so
like.
So this is not the end of the beginning. It's not even the beginning of the end. It's just, chapter 1, possibly, and then another 2 chapters to come.
Brexit never ends. You just move on to the next stage.
Okay. Well, on that wonderfully edifying note, Jill Rutter, to close chapter 1, in your opinion, does Boris Johnson have the numbers tomorrow?
It's looking very tight. We don't know, and as you said on the introductions, we actually don't know whether we're going to get the meaningful vote for tomorrow or not, because if this Letwin amendment passes, which looks like it might very well have the numbers, then actually it's postponed for another day, even so.
Okay, again, explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old. For those people watching at home, what is the Letwin amendment? What does it do? How does it change things?
The Letwin amendment is saying it's not enough to pass the meaningful vote tomorrow to prevent the Prime Minister from having to ask for an extension. Remember, back in September, MPs legislated to say if there wasn't a sort of approval of the Prime Minister's deal by the 19th of October, tomorrow, then the Prime Minister had to ask for an extension. Since they passed that bill, various people said there's a bit of a loophole. Right. And that loophole is they could vote for the deal tomorrow, but then fail to pass the legislation, and we would leave with no deal at the end of October. So in order to make sure they have a protection against that loophole, they're saying it's not good enough to pass the deal tomorrow. We're not passing the deal tomorrow. We have to wait until we've approved the entire bill implementing the treaty.
Now, Oliver Letwin has said in a letter that this is an insurance policy to make sure that the deal that he will vote for actually passes at the end of the day. But if you prolong the process, there's all sorts of room for mischief, isn't there, from MPs who don't like the deal?
Well, there's room for mischief, but there's also room for what you might call proper scrutiny of a really important treaty.
Yes. From their point of view, mischief, yeah. Right.
From government's point of view, get it through, slide through unamended is ideal. But you could say from a sort of point of view, a sort of democratic, parliamentary point of view, you actually want to give MPs a chance to look at this thing because it is really important treaty. So it's very, very odd to try and ram it through the Commons. If the government's on a timetable to get this through by the 31st of October, it really needs to complete all its Commons stages next week. Remember how long the government took to get the Maastricht Treaty through, even sort of relatively minor changes like the Lisbon Treaty, took much, much longer than that.
So do you expect the Letwin amendment to pass tomorrow?
Now Labour seem to be saying they're going to support it,
right,
which suggests that actually that sort of anti-no deal coalition we saw form at the beginning of September seems to be reassembling. Yeah. So on that basis you would think it's got a very good chance of passing.
And can this amendment pass, and can the Prime Minister still somehow claim that he will get Brexit done, perhaps not by the end of the month, but soon afterwards?
One of the things we'll find out from tomorrow, and we'll be listening to the speeches tomorrow, is to see how many votes appear to be coming over to his side. The ERG, are they coming over en masse, or one or two saying, actually, we're worried about the Democratic Unionists? How many Labour leavers is he really going to persuade to switch? The thing about tomorrow, though, is that they can declare their intentions, but they don't actually have to face going into the lobby with Boris Johnson and give him that boost.
And just very quickly, Sam, where does this leave frictionless trade? I know you've only got 15 seconds to answer that. No.
TBC. We will find out what the future relationship looks like, and it depends on the type of relationship that is negotiated post-withdrawal agreement.
Sam Lowe, Jill Rutter, thank you very much indeed. Now, they've arguably been the drivers of much of the Brexit debate. Nigel Farage's Brexit party is holding a rally in central London tonight as we speak. But while Mr Farage says that he can't support Boris Johnson's New Deal, his close friend Aaron Banks from the Leave.EU pressure group has backed it. Well, Liz Bates is with me now. Liz, how significant is this split?
Yes, well, as you say, the Brexit Party holding an event down the road from here tonight where Nigel Farage will be setting out his reasons for opposing Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. But very interesting, over the last few days, we've seen this split between him and his long-standing political ally, Aaron Banks, founder of leave.EU. Now, this is significant because this pair have had a huge influence over the Brexit process over the years. Now that they're divided at this crucial moment, that influence could have been lost.
And where does that leave Nigel Farage's influence over the split party?
Well, it's Nigel Farage, so he's always going to have a go at influencing the Brexit process. Interestingly, what else we're seeing tonight is at this event, 2 DUP MPs speaking as well. So we're seeing the Brexit Party and the DUP come together. They're trying to put some last-minute pressure on Tory Brexiteers, trying to get them to oppose Boris Johnson's Brexit deal in the Commons. And we know that if they can influence even 2 or 3 people in that, they could tip the balance. Liz
Bates, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now from South London is Independent MP Nick Bowles. Good evening to the programme.
Good evening.
Oh, excellent. So how are you going to vote tomorrow?
Well, tomorrow I'm going to vote for the Letwin amendment, of which I'm one of the co-sponsors, and then I will vote for the motion as amended. And I have made clear today that when the government brings the legislation to implement Johnson's deal, I will vote for that legislation at every stage. And with a fair wind, we should be able to get that legislation passed by the 31st of October and leave on time.
Now, you voted for the May deals on all 3 occasions. You said you were going to vote for this deal, but by voting for the Letwin amendment, doesn't that just complicate matters? Doesn't that create jeopardy for the government and then actually create the possibility of no deal at the end of the day?
No, not at all. It's, we're doing it in order to close off the possibility of no deal. The truth is that a meaningful vote is all very well, but it has never been the case that a meaningful vote on its own is sufficient to deliver a Brexit deal. You have to then pass legislation to implement the Brexit deal, and that was going to be needed whatever happens. Now, that legislation can be brought forward literally on Monday. I thought the government should have brought it forward tomorrow instead of the motion that they put down. But there's no reason why they can't bring it forward on Monday. We can vote for that legislation. We can work through the night. We can work through next weekend. There's absolutely no reason why we can't do that before the 31st of October. But if that amendment does not pass, then there's a very real risk that some of the hardline Brexiters will support the motion tomorrow in order to prevent any extension request being sent, and then will withdraw their support from stages of the bill, and therefore will scupper the deal and will leave us leaving on the 31st of October without a deal. Now, Oliver Letwin and I and many others, we have made the one thing the absolute priority is not to allow a no-deal Brexit to happen, and we're not going to stop now.
Right. OK, so let's say the Letwin amendment goes through. Can you say at all roughly when we might actually leave the European Union? How long does that push the Brexit date into the future?
Well, I genuinely believe, I'm not pretending that it's not going to be tough and that it's not going to require some very long days and late nights, but I genuinely believe that if the government brings the bill to Parliament on Monday, there is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't get it done, all of its stages, through the Lords and to Her Majesty to sign off by the 31st of October. And if that isn't possible, then it certainly shouldn't need more than a few days more. And a few days to get this done properly, and to get this done with a deal, surely that is a prize worth being a little bit patient. We've been waiting now for 3 years. It's driving us all crazy. A few more days isn't going to kill us.
But isn't that the point? I mean, what puzzles me is that you were famously in favour of a Norway-style arrangement, a soft Brexit. This is a much harder Brexit. So why would you want to vote for it?
My first priority has always been to get a deal. I voted for Theresa May's deal, even though I didn't think that that was a great deal either. But the key point about this is that what this is mainly is a divorce settlement. It's the deal to finish our membership of the European Union. What it is not is the final word, or even practically more than the first word, on what our future relationship will be. And it's perfectly possible for a government, maybe we'll have an election soon, maybe a different government will come to power, it's perfectly possible for that government to decide to put in place a Norway-style relationship or a much closer economic relationship. And I certainly would favour that. But what is on the table now is the divorce deal. And we have been arguing over it for 3 years. I think we now need to get it done and move on to the next stage where we can start debating the future relationship.
So Brexit fatigue has triumphed, certainly in your case.
No, because I've been supporting a deal consistently from the start, and I always said I would. So it's not that I've suddenly given in. I've consistently been supporting every kind of deal presented, because it's only when we have voted through a divorce deal that we can actually get to grips with negotiating that future relationship. Now, I would like that future relationship to be as close as possible. Common Market 2.0, as we called it. Membership of the single market, membership of the customs union, or something close. But obviously the government doesn't agree with me, and certainly Boris Johnson doesn't agree with me. It's one of the reasons why I left the Conservative Party, is because I don't agree with them on that future relationship. But I do agree with them that we need to respect the referendum result, we need to leave, and then we can argue about the future relationship.
OK, got to leave it there. Nick Bowles, thank you very much indeed. Now, on top of the Brexit drama here in Westminster, a climate change campaigner has scaled the scaffolding of the Big Ben Tower behind me. The Extinction Rebellion activist, who appears to be dressed as Boris Johnson, climbed onto the base shortly after 3:30 this afternoon. The group say that his action is intended to highlight government inaction on the climate and ecological emergency. In the past half an hour, the protester has been arrested. Now, at the heart of all the Brexit negotiations have been questions about how Northern Ireland will be treated in any future agreement. But the DUP, once the power brokers in Brexit, stood firm in their criticism of Boris Johnson's New Deal, insisting it creates a new trade barrier between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. But how is all this going down in Unionist heartlands? Our Home Affairs correspondent, Andy Davis, reports.
Few parts of the UK are as festooned in allegiance to the Union as streets like this in East Belfast, or as sensitive to the politics underpinning it. A great betrayal ran one newspaper headline here this morning as the DUP decried what they called a toxic deal. The Brussels breakthrough was getting short shrift here.
One word, rubbish.
Why?
Why? Because he went back on his word. He sold us out, so he has.
Boris Johnson?
Boris Johnson, he has. What about the people here in Northern Ireland? Absolute disgrace, so it is.
Fueling this anger, Boris Johnson last year denouncing the very notion of checks and customs controls between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, he's now accused of embracing.
No British Conservative government could or should sign up to any such arrangement.
I think we've been betrayed, and I think a united Ireland is closer than it has ever been.
Well, I would disagree with that. But this idea of reviewing the thing every 4 years is absolutely ludicrous, because all you're starting is the same argument again every 4 years.
That review mechanism every 4 years is a big sticking point for the DUP, not least because it would need a majority of Assembly members to change the deal. And since 2017, Unionists no longer enjoy a majority in the Assembly, and few expect that to change anytime soon.
In the last Assembly election in Northern Ireland, Unionism lost its overall majority in the Assembly for the first time. That reflects demographic changes and long-term changes. So Unionism is facing for the first time not controlling a majority in the Assembly in Northern Ireland. That has been accelerated in Brexit, where more and more people have been seen to be disapproving of the Unionist position on Brexit.
Hence their fear that they'd never get to change this new political status quo under the deal.
Indeed, and that is the risk that now for Unionism is that if they are in this system will never be reversed.
But for all the outcry at a political level, not everyone in places where unionist credentials are writ large consider the deal a bad thing.
Well, I think it's okay. And the DUP want to get wise up and let them do it and get out of the EU. Get out.
From the Newtonards Road to Hollywood, 4 miles away, it takes little time to be reminded of the divisions in grassroots unionism over Brexit and now this deal.
I think it will go through.
Would you like it to go through?
I would like to go through till we get it organised with everything in Northern Ireland.
You don't think it threatens the integrity of the union, as some fear?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think just people here just want to get on with life, and I think if it's going to make life better for us, just go with it.
What this deal might mean for unionism is prompting fierce debate. Its implications for business in Northern Ireland still being worked out. And so too, of course, the consequences if, in the days ahead, the DUP manage to stop it. Andy Davis, Channel 4 News, Belfast.
Well, with Northern Ireland now promised a special place between the UK and the EU, Scotland's First Minister has been in London making clear her displeasure with the deal and its consequences for her country. I caught up with her earlier and began by asking how she justified voting down the deal if that meant more delay and uncertainty.
This is a really bad deal for Scotland. It takes us out of the single market, the customs union, not just the EU, all against our will, and actually places us at a competitive disadvantage with Northern Ireland and leaves us as the only part of the UK with no say over our future relationship with Europe.
Are you a bit jealous of that Northern Ireland deal?
I don't know. Jealous is the word I would use. I don't grudge Northern Ireland it, but I do know that it potentially damages Scotland. So
if the deal passes, would you try and get the same deal for Scotland as Northern Ireland has?
I'd try to get independence for Scotland so we can be members of the European Union.
That's a little way down the track, though.
Well, hopefully not too much down the track. I think there should be an independence referendum next year to allow us to choose our own future.
We're at the 11th hour now. You could have backed a softer Brexit in Theresa May's deal. You could have backed a second referendum or revocation of Article 50 by teaming up with the opposition parties. That fell apart. You might have tried, but jointly, collectively, isn't the opposition responsible for some of the damage that you say has now been done?
In terms of a softer Brexit, I brought forward proposals in December 2016, took them to Theresa May, said, look, I don't want to leave the EU, but if there's a compromise here, we leave the EU but stay in the single market and customs union. Those proposals were dismissed out of hand. On the second part of your question about the opposition, yes, I do think there is reason to be critical of the opposition for not finding a way to unite behind a plan. That's not been for the want of trying on the SNP's part. We have backed revocation, we've backed a second referendum, we've tried to encourage over the last few weeks the opposition to come behind a plan of forcing a general election. There seems to be an equivocation on the part of Labour and the Liberal Democrats to come together behind any of these things. And
the Lib Dems are fully in favour of revocation, but do you accept some responsibility for failing to win the argument with the opposition collectively? Because actually, if you had come together and established a plan...
Not really. I don't really accept too much responsibility for that, because we've been the ones that have been trying... I've said all along, look, we've all got to compromise, come behind this. We've really, really tried. And for some reason, the Liberals didn't want a general election, Labour didn't want a general election, Labour have sat on the fence on Brexit, on a second referendum. I've got a growing suspicion that Labour are going to tilt the balance in favour of Boris Johnson's deal.
And what will be the consequences of that in Scotland?
In Scotland, Labour will never be forgiven. If it becomes the handmaiden, the facilitator of Brexit, then it will be game over for Labour in Scotland. I mean, they're only just clinging on by their fingernails right now, but I don't think Labour would ever be forgiven for that.
I know you don't want to contemplate this prospect, but it is quite possible, because of what you've said about Labour, that Boris Johnson gets this deal through tomorrow. What do you do then? Do you then call an immediate confidence vote? And do you have any prospect of persuading Labour to back a general election? Or is that like getting turkeys to vote for Christmas?
So we will try to bring about a vote of confidence and a general election. But I will also continue with my plans to ensure that Scotland has the ability to choose a different future, because if this deal passes, I actually think history will look back on the day this deal passes as the day the Westminster political union died, because Northern Ireland will have been set on a particular path, and it will have been demonstrated to Scotland that our voice can't be heard within that union, our interests can't be protected, and the only future where our interests can be protected is through independence.
So you're ready and waiting?
I want a referendum next year, and I'm determined there will be one.
And if Westminster refuses, as there's every indication they might, why are you not prepared to do what the Catalan separatists have done and defy them, hold an illegal referendum and face the consequences?
Well, look, Catalonia, and I've got huge sympathy for the position Catalonia is in, but Catalonia is not independent after the process they went through. And if Scotland is to become independent, then we have to do it by a process that is legitimate and is capable of being recognised, having allowed a majority support for independence to be expressed. I'm not just in the business of having a process to consider independence, I want to deliver independence, and it's got to be legal and legitimate.
But you are quite clear that regardless of what some of your supporters want, quite a lot of your supporters want, you're not going to be a martyr for that cause by illegally pressing ahead.
It's not about me. If it was just about making myself a martyr, that's one thing.
You'd be happy to go to jail.
Look, no, let's not take this interview down a sort of silly path. But it's about delivering independence. If we seek to achieve independence by a process that is not legitimate and legal, it won't be recognised by international partners. So it will not be possible to deliver the independence we want. I'm just being pragmatic.
First Minister, thanks very much.
Thank you.